Have you ever found yourself trying to change something in your life, full of motivation at first, but suddenly it feels like an invisible force starts pulling you back? You make plans, set goals, promise yourself that this time will be different. But without realizing it, you begin to procrastinate, find excuses, feel an inexplicable exhaustion, or even create obstacles where none existed before. With each attempt at change, it seems like something inside you is working against your own progress, sabotaging your dreams and goals. This feeling of being at war with yourself is frustrating. You know what you want, you know it's possible, but for some reason, you just can't move forward. And the worst part is, the more you try, the stronger this internal resistance seems to become. This isn't just a lack of discipline or willpower, but a much deeper mechanism, rooted in your own mind. And to understand what is happening, we need to look beyond our conscious perception. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, spent much of his life studying the human unconscious and identified a fundamental concept for understanding self-sabotage: the shadow. This term may sound mysterious, but in reality, it refers to everything we repress within ourselves throughout life. These are desires, emotions, and personality traits that, for some reason, were rejected and pushed deep into our minds, hidden where we can't see them. This happens because, from an early age, we learn what is acceptable and what is not. Society, family, and even our own experiences teach us to deny certain aspects of who we are. If a child realizes that expressing anger leads to punishment, they may learn to suppress that emotion. If someone grows up hearing that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness, they may start hiding their sensitivity even from themselves. But these parts of us do not disappear. They continue to exist, operating in the dark, influencing our decisions, our reactions, and most importantly, sabotaging what we consciously desire. Because when we ignore an aspect of our psyche, it finds other ways to manifest itself. And that's how, even when we try to follow a path we believe to be right, we can find ourselves being unknowingly diverted. We create seemingly rational justifications, feel emotions we can't explain, and in the end, we find ourselves stuck in a cycle of frustration, unable to understand why our efforts don't bring the expected results. But this internal struggle doesn't have to be a life sentence. There is a way out, and it begins with recognizing that the shadow is not your enemy, but a part of you that needs to be understood. To overcome self-sabotage, the first step is to bring to light what has been left in the shadows. The shadow is like a hidden space within us, where we store everything we once learned to reject. But ignoring these aspects does not make them disappear. On the contrary, the more we deny them, the stronger they become. Jung discovered that these repressed contents not only exist, but become autonomous within our psyche. This means that, even without realizing it, parts of us continue to act and influence our choices without our conscious permission. And this is how self-sabotage happens. While we believe we are in control, unconscious forces work behind the scenes, creating invisible obstacles. These repressed aspects do not want to be ignored, and so they find ways to manifest. A common example is when a person desperately wants to succeed, but somehow always seems to move away from the opportunities that could lead them there. They postpone important decisions, get distracted by irrelevant things, or when they finally get close to what they want, they find a way to lose everything. This happens because within them, there is a conflict. Consciously, they believe they want to succeed, but on a deeper level, there may be a part of them that fears what success might bring. Perhaps this part is afraid of responsibility, judgment, or even of not being good enough to sustain this new reality. And because this insecurity is not acknowledged, it acts on its own, creating invisible barriers to keep the person in their comfort zone. And this is one of the biggest challenges of the shadow. It does not present itself clearly. It hides behind seemingly logical excuses, inexplicable sensations, and even physical symptoms. Headaches, fatigue, anxiety. Often these signs are not just external issues, but reflections of a deep internal conflict. But if the shadow is part of us, how can we deal with it? Jung believed that the only way to weaken this hidden influence was to bring the unconscious into consciousness. In other words, to make visible what is operating in the shadows. And this does not simply mean accepting everything that has been repressed, but rather recognizing these aspects, understanding them, and finding a place for them within our conscious identity. Because the problem is not in what we repress, but in the disconnection between who we are and who we believe we are. And this disconnection keeps us trapped in repetitive patterns, where we try to change but always end up back in the same place. If we want to overcome self-sabotage, we need to stop fighting against ourselves and start understanding what is really happening. We need to question our own actions, our reactions, and the patterns that repeat in our lives. Only then can we begin to clearly see what is hidden and finally take control of our own destiny. And to understand this in practice, let's observe how this phenomenon manifests in real life, often without the person realizing what is happening. Self-sabotage does not happen by chance. It is the direct result of this internal conflict between what we consciously desire and the hidden aspects we reject within ourselves. But since these unconscious forces do not present themselves clearly, the only way to see them is by observing their effects on our lives. Imagine someone who has a deep desire to change their reality. Maybe this person wants to start a new project, build a business, move to another city, or transform a destructive habit. At first, there is natural enthusiasm, a genuine desire to move forward. But as the first difficulties arise, this motivation begins to crumble. Small delays become frequent. The fear of exposure, rejection, or failure disguises itself as, "I need to prepare better. Now is not the right time," or even, "Maybe I don't want this as much as I thought." And before they realize it, this person is back to square one, once again, with the same old frustration. What is happening here? What makes someone who desires change so much end up sabotaging their own journey? The answer lies precisely in the shadow. If there is a pattern of self-sabotage, it means that something is operating behind the scenes, preventing change from happening. It could be a hidden fear of the unknown, a deeply ingrained belief that they are not worthy, or even a sense of identity tied to their current reality that, consciously or unconsciously, they are not ready to let go of. For example, someone who has always seen themselves as a failure may, without realizing it, resist success, because this new identity requires them to abandon everything they have believed about themselves until now. Success, in this case, does not just represent an achievement, but a threat to the image this person has built over a lifetime. And becoming successful would mean such a drastic break from this identity that the unconscious reacts by trying to keep everything as it is. And this is the key to understanding why self-sabotage happens. Our unconscious is not working against us out of malice, but out of protection. It seeks to maintain stability, preserve what is already known, and avoid what might seem dangerous. Even if we rationally know that certain changes are good for us, if the unconscious perceives them as a threat, it will act to prevent them from happening. And that is why so many people remain stuck in repetitive cycles. They fight against themselves without realizing that, in reality, they are simply following an unconscious program that was installed years ago. So, how do we break this cycle? How do we change this pattern and finally move forward? To find this answer, we need to analyze a specific case of self-sabotage and understand how the shadow subtly acts to keep someone trapped in their comfort zone, even when that zone no longer makes sense. To clearly see how the shadow operates in self-sabotage, let's look at a concrete example. Imagine a man who has always identified himself as a solitary person. From an early age, he learned to value independence and believes that his greatest desire is to live far from society, running an online business to support himself without relying on anyone. He spent years feeding this idea, making plans, and dreaming of the freedom that comes with a completely autonomous lifestyle. But in practice, something strange happens. Every time he gets close to achieving this dream, he sabotages his own opportunities. One day, an excellent offer arises to buy an isolated piece of land, exactly what he wanted, but he hesitates and lets the opportunity slip away. At another moment, his online business begins to grow and attract many followers, but for no apparent reason, he loses interest and stops posting content. When someone questions his decisions, he always has seemingly rational justifications. It wasn't the right time. Maybe this isn't the best place to invest. I think this job isn't for me anymore. But are these justifications really logical? Or is something inside him resisting his own desire for independence? What this man does not realize is that there is a hidden part of his psyche that fears loneliness. At some point in his life, he may have learned to reject this need for connection. Perhaps he had experiences where trusting others was painful, or he internalized the idea that depending on someone emotionally is a weakness. As a result, this part of himself was repressed and pushed into the shadow. He came to believe that he doesn't need anyone and that his greatest desire is to be completely self-sufficient. But deep down, that repressed part still exists, and it does not want to be ignored. Even if he is unaware of it, this fear of loneliness remains active, influencing his decisions indirectly. Every time he gets close to the isolated lifestyle he claims to want, this hidden part reacts, creating invisible obstacles to steer him away from that path. And this is how self-sabotage manifests. The conscious part of this man wants one thing, but the unconscious part wants another. The conflict between these two sides generates resistance, procrastination, and an endless cycle of frustration. He may believe that his choices are rational, but in reality, he is being guided by a repressed aspect of himself that he doesn't even recognize. And this is a dynamic that repeats itself in many areas of life. How many times has someone said they want to find a healthy relationship, yet they always choose problematic partners? Or claimed they want financial prosperity, but the moment they start earning money, they spend it impulsively. These situations are not mere coincidences. They are direct reflections of unresolved internal conflicts, where repressed parts of the personality operate in the shadows, sabotaging conscious goals. The good news is that this cycle is not permanent. It can be broken. But to do so, we must first recognize that something hidden is influencing our decisions. Only when we become aware of these invisible forces can we begin to transform them. And understanding this leads us to an even deeper question. Why does the shadow have so much power over us? What gives these repressed aspects the ability to control our actions without us even realizing it? The shadow holds power over us because everything we repress does not disappear. Instead, it gains autonomy within our psyche. When we deny an aspect of ourselves, it does not cease to exist. It simply operates beyond our conscious control. Jung described this dynamic as autonomous complexes, fragmented parts of the personality that behave like independent entities within our minds. This means that even if the ego, our conscious self, believes it is in control, invisible forces may be making decisions for us. These complexes act like little selves inside us, each with its own desires, fears, and ambitions. And often, they directly conflict with what we consciously want to achieve. This is why we feel resistance when we try to change. If one part of us wants to move forward, but an unconscious complex perceives this change as a threat, it will act to prevent it. And because the unconscious mind expresses itself in subtle ways, this sabotage can manifest in forms we do not even associate with our own psyche. For example, imagine someone deciding to pursue a new career. At first, this person feels excited and invests energy in learning. But as the first challenges arise, procrastination begins. Initially, it seems like mere laziness, but soon physical symptoms appear: fatigue, headaches, an inexplicable lack of motivation. Every step forward becomes an enormous effort, as if something inside them is pulling them back. This happens because there is a complex operating behind the scenes. Perhaps at some point in life, this person associated change with failure or suffering. They may have been taught from an early age that security is more important than personal fulfillment. Or maybe they were criticized for trying something new in the past, and without realizing it, developed an unconscious fear of exposure and judgment. And because this part of the psyche was repressed, it cannot be understood or resolved. It simply acts autonomously, trying to protect the person from something that, to the unconscious mind, seems dangerous. Even though they rationally know that changing careers is the best path, the sabotaging complex ensures they avoid this change at all costs. This mechanism is not limited to major decisions. It influences our relationships, our self-esteem, and our daily habits. If someone has a complex related to rejection, they may unconsciously push away anyone who tries to get close, even while wanting a healthy relationship. If someone has a complex tied to scarcity, they may waste financial opportunities without realizing it, because deep down, they believe they will never have enough. The problem is not just the existence of these complexes, but the fact that we do not realize they are in control. We think we are making conscious decisions, but in reality, we are being guided by these fragmented parts of our own mind. But there is a way to regain control, and this path does not involve fighting against these repressed aspects, but rather integrating them. Jung believed that the only way to free ourselves from the influence of the shadow was to bring these hidden contents to consciousness, understand their motivations, and find a way to reconcile them with our conscious self. And it is precisely this process of integration that allows us to break the cycle of self-sabotage and finally live authentically and fully. If self-sabotage arises from the conflict between what we consciously want and the hidden aspects of our psyche, the solution is not to fight against ourselves but to integrate these repressed parts. The shadow is not an enemy to be battled, but a messenger. Every pattern of sabotage, every internal resistance, and every inexplicable emotion is trying to tell us something we have ignored for too long. Jung stated that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This means that as long as we do not recognize these repressed aspects, we will continue repeating the same cycles, believing they are the result of chance or external forces. But in reality, we are guided by internal patterns we do not yet understand. So how can we bring the shadow into the light? The first step is to observe patterns. Everything that repeats itself in your life has a cause. If you constantly face the same difficulties, procrastinate at the same moments, experience seemingly irrational fears, or attract the same types of relationships, an unconscious pattern is at play. These patterns are not random. They are reflections of your shadow trying to express itself. After identifying these patterns, it is essential to question their justifications. When you catch yourself sabotaging something you desire, what reasons does your mind give for this behavior? Do they truly make sense, or are they just excuses masking a deeper fear? Often, the reasons we use to justify our actions are mere distractions created by the unconscious to avoid confronting what truly scares us. Another important step is allowing yourself to feel. The shadow cannot be integrated through logic alone. It must be felt. The emotions that arise when we try to change are the key to understanding what is hidden. Instead of running from fear, insecurity, or resistance, ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to show me? This brings us to a crucial point: dialoguing with the shadow. Instead of ignoring or repressing these hidden aspects, we need to learn to listen to them. Jung used a method called active imagination, which involves allowing these internal contents to express themselves in some form, through writing, drawing, or simply reflecting on them openly, without judgment. By giving voice to what was repressed, we strip it of its destructive power and begin to integrate it into our consciousness. And finally, the most challenging part: acting despite the resistance. When we bring the shadow into the light, it does not disappear immediately. It will continue trying to pull us back into old patterns because that is what it knows. But now, knowing what is happening, we have a choice. We can feel the resistance and move forward anyway. Every small conscious action strengthens our true self and weakens the shadow's grip on our decisions. Overcoming self-sabotage does not mean eliminating all doubts and insecurities, but rather learning to navigate them with awareness. It means understanding that the shadow is part of who we are, but we do not have to be controlled by it. And when we integrate these hidden aspects, we regain power over our own lives. True freedom comes from self-knowledge. The more we understand ourselves, the less we are trapped by unconscious patterns that hold us back. And this journey never truly ends, but with each step, we become more whole, more authentic, and more capable of building the life we truly want to live. If this content resonated with you and helped you see self-sabotage in a new way, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Not only does this help me continue bringing videos like this, but it also allows this knowledge to reach more people who might be facing the same challenges. And let me know in the comments, have you ever noticed a self-sabotaging pattern in your life? Let's exchange ideas and grow together on this journey of self-discovery. See you in the next video.